In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. So, Father, we're grateful for all that you do for us, and we're certainly grateful for your wonderful creation. We just pray that you would make us good stewards of that creation. Give us a heart for your creation, that we would indeed look for ways that we could be better stewards of it. We pray you bless our time tonight, our speaker, that you might speak words through her that would be helpful to us in our individual situations. And we ask all this in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Well, thank you so much. We appreciate that very much. As I mentioned, our presenter tonight is Jeanine Ramirez, a graduate student of American University in Washington, D.C. Jeanine graduated from St. Leo University in 2020, just recently, with a BA in Political Science and minors in American Politics and Homeland Security. She earned an honors distinction in her major, the first student in her university ever to do so. And I should say, our university, I'm also a St. Leo graduate. Throughout college, she was able to experience working with senators on Capitol Hill and with the Florida Attorney General's office in Tampa. Eager for a deeper understanding of the Church's teachings on environmental policy, Jeanine joined the Laudato Si Advocates program. She serves as the current program intern and helps to encourage young adults to care for the Lord's creation by advocating for federal environmental policies that can help in their dioceses. So it's my pleasure to welcome our local talent tonight, Jeanine Ramirez. Jeanine?
Thank you so much, Sabrina. That was an amazing introduction. And I'm just going to go straight in and share my screen and start my presentation for you all. I'm very excited to have this opportunity to be here with you all today. And I just hope that somewhere in this presentation, you find that the Lord speaks to you. So to begin, I'm going to be talking about Laudato Si and integral ecology, as expressed in Pope Francis's 2015 encyclical, Laudato Si, on care for our common home. And this is not going to be your typical presentation on climate change, where the presenter paints a picture of doom and gloom. Ooh, okay, so I had to fix my presentation real quick. It is auto-playing. Anyways. It's not going to be your standard presentation where the presenter's all doom and gloom and talking about the bleakness of our future and of our climate. Rather, this presentation is meant to bring hope and to help others understand that growing closer to the Lord is possible simply by treating his creation with the respect that it deserves. So a little bit about me before I get on to the presentation. I just wanted to say that I'm a graduate of St. Leo from the class of 2020. I was the first student to receive a political science BA with the honors distinction. I grew up in Florida. I was born and raised here, and just a little tidbit, I loved nothing more than Florida winters. When the weather hit 32 degrees, we had to bring our plants inside so they wouldn't get frosted. And my family and I could, for once, gather under blankets and watch a nice Christmas movie together. But since things have been beginning to change and the climate itself is shifting, it is becoming a little different from what we're used to, I really began to become invested in what is it that is changing and making the climate so volatile now. So throughout high school, throughout college, I became engaged in the political culture in the Tampa Bay area. I worked on the Tampa City Council. I worked for the Florida Attorney General's office, and I pursued that passion in college, where in Washington, D.C., I had the opportunity to work for a senator. And although I went to pursue doing tasks on Homeland Security, I ended up being focused on environmental policy. And that was a big 360, not at all what I imagined to be working on. But I found out that there was a love for it that I just didn't know that I had. And so I got to sit in on hearings about the PFAS contaminating our water system, the algal blooms that are affecting Lake Okeechobee, and how organizations like the Army Corps of Engineers can actually play a big role in the way that the community functions and our environment. So when I was tasked with that, I came home from DC and I wanted to pursue it. So I became a member of the Laudato Si Advocates program. I'm the first from Florida, and I was a member of the inaugural class, meaning I was one of 3 in the country. Now I'm pursuing my master's at the American University in Washington, D.C., although luckily I get to be home in Florida for a little bit longer because of COVID. But I'm currently serving as the Laudato Si Advocates program intern, where I'm specifically tasked to help our members reach out to their legislators and to work on policy and legislation pertaining to local dioceses or local communities, and just trying to get awareness out there of what we can do with our faith to affect the climate. So, a little bit about the presentation. I'm going to go over what is integral ecology, why is it important, and how and why we should get involved now. So like I said before, this presentation is not going to be your standard presentation on climate change. It's not a hopeless cause that we have to avoid at all costs. Rather, this presentation, I hope, will paint a picture for you to recognize the desperate need for change and explain how we can step up to answer Pope Francis's call to action and to work together towards living how the Lord intended for us to live and to draw us closer to him at the same time. So the graphic on the left represents the mindset towards the environment, where the current mindset towards the environment versus where we need to be. Oh no, I don't know why it's doing that, but we'll work with it. Rather than reaching out of fear of the future, Pope Francis's encyclical Laudato Si calls us to act out of hope, act in hope of becoming a community that's united in Christ. So what is integral ecology? I did not know what integral ecology was before I joined the Laudato Si Advocates program. I hadn't honestly read much on Laudato Si before then either. So this is a really important point, and I'm really excited to be sharing this with you all because integral ecology is what makes this presentation different. It in and of itself is a beautiful outlook that inspires the idea that society and nature function hand in hand. So the climate issue and its changing is not just an issue of society or the environment, it's actually both. So as the quality of the environment declines, so does our quality of life, and vice versa. So the graphic above I created to kind of paint an easier picture to understand it, but the climate crisis is made up of the struggles of our environment and our society. I love this quote by Pope Francis from Laudato Si. It says, "We are not faced with 2 separate crises, one environmental and the other social, but rather one complex crisis, which is both social and environmental." So that being said, if we truly want to care for our neighbors, we must include caring for our environment in that as well. So integral ecology is different in that it's a really holistic approach to changing our environment right away. The beauty of it is that it's as inclusive as it can get. It requires recognizing the command that the Lord has over his creation. It requires that we treat his creation with the respect that it deserves. And in the process, it also connects us with him. And so in this way, everything is interconnected. So why is integral ecology so important? What is different about it? Integral ecology, as I mentioned before, is holistic. And as a matter of fact, it embodies all 7 pillars of Catholic social teaching. It recognizes the life and dignity of all of the Lord's creation by emphasizing our role in caring for creation. It requires and promotes family and community participation. It recognizes the rights and responsibility of man towards each other and nature, and it looks out for the poor and the vulnerable specifically. It recognizes the dignity of work, emphasizing the importance and vital role of our waste management professionals, our roadside cleaners, our dock workers, farmers, our florists and landscapers, and all the other professions that are overlooked but significantly impact our environment. So integral ecology also encourages solidarity, not just between each other, but between us and nature. So I think it's an important point to bring forward is that integral ecology is so holistic that it includes science. People have this idea that religion and science cannot coexist, but we actually need science and able to recognize in the context of the changing climate, what we can learn, who is affected the most, how we can help, and how we can prepare for more changes to come. And so Pope Francis wrote that sciences and technologies are made for man and for the world, not the man and the world for science and technology. They are at the service of a dignified and healthy life for all, now and in the future, and make our common home more livable and supportive, more careful and guarded. So the way that we can act and treat the environment may not seem to be significant in the moment as we are making these decisions, but it inevitably has a considerable impact. If no one else were to act in such a way that it would harm the environment, then the climate crisis would be prolonged. It wouldn't be as immediate as it is today. But seeing that the throwaway culture in our society is so prevalent, our actions build up. And anything that seems like a small impact is actually contributing to a much greater one. And so that is why it's important to recognize how the environment affects everyone. So the graphic above is a way that I try to simplify the connection between the environmental struggle and society. So if we were able to solve all the problems in the first column, then the mental health and well-being of everyone, especially those in the third column, will notice a change in the quality of their life. But why is this urgent? Why do we need to take action now? As seen in the slide before, our actions affect everyone, but there are some out there who are not as readily equipped to act and protect themselves as others are. In his encyclical Laudato Si, Pope Francis wrote that a true ecological approach always becomes a social approach. It must integrate questions of justice in debates on the environment, so as to hear both the cry of the earth and the cry of the poor. So, for example, in Hillsborough and Pinellas counties alone, there are nearly 3,000 homeless men and women. That means that they have little to no means of adequately protecting themselves from the changes that we're facing in our environment. The poorest among us are also the most vulnerable, and yet they are the ones who are subjected to the grueling elements without protection. There are those who also have to worry about how the environment affects the distribution of nutritional food. Those who find themselves in poverty have to worry about whether or not they can pay the bills to afford having their fans on or to run their air conditioning. So in all, there are so many people in our area that are affected by this issue, whether we recognize it or not, because of the way that it impacts us. Even though high temperatures can affect the quality of life, they also affects the quality of life for the elderly population, those who cannot go outside like they used to, or they cannot take the extreme elements. Hurricane Irma reportedly resulted in the death of 137 senior citizens who were living in like older homes. And that's just because of the extreme shifts and the things that are required of them to be able to protect themselves in these circumstances. So that moves on and leads us to Pope Francis's call to practice integral ecology and the attention that it brings to the suffering of our neighbors, whether that be man or nature. In Laudato Si, Pope Francis wrote that the universe unfolds in God, who fills it completely. Hence, there is a mystical meaning to be found in a leaf, in a mountain trail, in a dewdrop, in a poor person's face. The ideal is not to only pass from the exterior to the interior to discover the action of God in the soul, but also to discover God in all things. To that I say, just because we may not be able to tell how the changing climate impacts us, it does mean that there are others who are gravely affected by it. Integral ecology recognizes that God is in the person who sleeps on the side of the road and in nature as much as the person who works from home or in an office building. So why should we begin to engage in integral ecology now? Why should we adapt this? We need to begin incorporating integral ecology into our lives now, because as Christ said, truly I say to you, to the extent that you did it to one of these brothers of mine, even the least of them, you did it to me. This lifestyle is different and difficult because it's countercultural. You see, we live in a society in a world of instant gratification and self-interestedness. And integral ecology is not that. But the reward, however, is hope. Hope for a future where our lives are in solidarity with creation, where the quality of life for all is better, where we truly understand our individual impacts on society, where our actions make stronger and more equitable communities, and where the dignity and value of all life is recognized. This is the future that I want to pass down to our future generations, a future that is green because we learn to care for our environment, and not one that is dark because we could not recognize the value in our surroundings. So how do we start? How do we start practicing integral ecology? The answer is simple, straightforward, and one I'm sure you have heard before. The best way we can start making a change is by starting in our homes and in our communities. Pope Francis was very aware of this when he wrote Laudato Si. He was very adamant and said that many things have to change course, but it is we human beings above all that needs to change. And so although integral ecology should be recognized at all levels of government, our government was created to reflect the will of the people, and nothing will change unless we decide to act. So I focus on family. Focusing on the family is critical to the church's mission. It is within the family that habits are formed, words are passed down, morals are learned. And that's why setting an example at home is so important. Whether it be turning off the water while you're brushing your teeth, reducing using plastic bottles and using reusable ones, using metal straws, turning off lights when you're not in the room, simple things like that, carpooling, or even walking when you have the chance. Although these changes are easier to adapt to at a younger age, it can be done. And it's the family that starts this change. So then why then, if it's so family oriented, focus on the community? Well, integral ecology is not meant to be experienced alone. It's important that we share this idea with others so that we may be witnesses to Christ through the beauty of nature and to other people. And so Pope Francis wrote, in this way, the world and the quality of life of the poorest are cared for, with a sense of solidarity, which at the same time, aware that we live in a common home, which God has entrusted to us. These community actions, when they express self-giving love, can also become an intense spiritual experience. And that last line, I hope, is what stood out to you because it emphasizes the importance of being in a community with others when we're practicing integral ecology. So how do we engage in integral ecology? What does that look like for us? Well, at home, you can go for a walk and recognize the beauty of God and nature, or you can slowly but surely begin to implement eco-friendly changes at home or in your workplace. Stop using plastic bottles. You can make crafts out of reusable items. Little things like that. Or you can even get your family involved and study the Catholic Climate Covenant resources or the resources from the USCCB's Environmental Justice Program. In the community, one could set up environmental awareness programs, participate in city or statewide cleanups. One could reach out to your state or local federal representatives or senators. Furthermore, Laudato Si states that community is essential because policies related to climate change and environmental protection cannot be altered with every change of government. Results take time and demand immediate outlays, which may not produce tangible effects within any one government's term. So essentially, the laws will not do enough unless we stand up together. So the environment won't have hope without us. That's this idea that we are connected in a spiritual way to the environment. We are both created by the Lord to do different things, but in that sense, we have to help the environment as the environment is meant to help us. So although we may not be able to stop the climate from warming, we can do our best to protect each other by protecting the earth. We need to stop looking at caring for our environment as a burden and instead look at it as an opportunity to witness and encounter the wonders of the Lord. Furthermore, we have the potential to adapt to the changes around us and to work together in hopes of one day being in solidarity with creation. We should be doing what we can to promote a healthy environment by showing others the benefits of practicing integral ecology. Decisions should not simply be about avoiding building factories that produce a significant carbon footprint, but also to create factories which encourage the preservation and protection of the surrounding environment. And Pope Francis expresses this in his encyclical, as he wrote, "Political and institutional frameworks do not exist simply to avoid bad practice, but also to promote best practice, to stimulate creativity in seeking new solutions, and to encourage individual or group initiatives." So if you are interested in ever reaching out to your local officials, these are some ways to reach out to your legislators. The myfloridahouse.gov will help you find your Florida representatives. floridasenate.gov will help you find your Florida senators, whereas house.gov and senate.gov can help you find your federal representatives and senators. And it's really easy. If you don't know who they are, you can just search your area code, little things like that, put in where your district is, and it should immediately tell you who your representatives are. But also to get to know what's happening in the government with legislation. And so if you want to become more read up on that or more aware of what's happening, govtrack.us can tell you exactly what bills your senators or representatives are putting forth in regards to the environment. And so they do a really good job breaking that down and making it really easy for you to find. So just a few things to keep an eye out for. The Great American Outdoors Act was recently signed into law. The goal of it is to preserve America's majestic natural wonders and priceless historical treasures. But it's important to keep in mind that broad sweeping legislation like this does not always strike at the core or the root of local environmental problems. On a broader scale, this is amazing. It is a push in the right direction. It's a sign that people are aware of the plight of the environment, but also it will not discuss a lot of the matters that we're facing here in Tampa Bay or in the Diocese of St. Petersburg area. On a closer note, the Clean Waterways Act was recently implemented in Florida with the goal of minimizing the impact of known sources of nutrient pollution, realigning the state's resources to enhance the protection of Florida's environment, and strengthening regulatory requirements. Once again, this is a step in the right direction, and I'm very proud of the state of Florida for making a move on this. But if we want to see changes in our community, in our parishes, in our backyard, we have to start and we have to act first. And so since it is election season, I would like to mention that integral ecology is not about political parties. Integral ecology is about answering our call to reflect Christ and protecting our common home. It's about the decisions that we will make behind closed doors that very few will see. At the end of the day, we can't and we must not forget that we're defined by God, not politics, and we should humbly pursue Him in our everyday lives, and practicing integral ecology can help us do just that. So although the government can help, at the end of the day, we cannot depend solely upon them to do our job for us. We always have and will continue to carry the weight of this responsibility on our shoulders. So I don't know if many of you have ever watched The Lorax or read it. It is one of my favorite books. I grew up on Dr. Seuss. My godmother, it was her favorite. And so I really wanted to emphasize the different elements of integral ecology in this book and movie. They're both great. I love it because it's not just any children's book. It is honest and truthful about the climate crisis we're facing today. It perfectly emphasizes the damage of throwaway culture, self-interestedness, and what happens when you minimize the value of all life. So just like this presentation, the book isn't about what life will look like by viewing our environmental problem as just another problem that we have. It shows how society and the environment are perfectly linked together and how one person can make a difference. It was really profound reading the book and reading the line that says, "I meant no harm. I most truly did not, but I had to grow bigger and bigger I got." Most of us make decisions and throw things away without intending to hurt the environment. It's not our goal to, but being unaware of the repercussions adds up, and it's abling, and it leaves room for it to grow within us. And so this book shows the need for change, the challenges of answering the call to action, and that hope comes with a future of balance between us and the rest of creation. And so these few bullets on the screen just show a lot of the parallels between the Lorax and real life. A life of consumerism and greed, seeking self-satisfaction or satisfaction in the material world, and ignoring the value of life and creation. At the end of the book results in all of the animals having to flee. The movie picks up afterwards and portrays in such a way a society of throwaway culture, how investing ourselves in that leads us to be self-interested and very individualistic and closed off. And all of those things, as Christians, we are not called to be. We are called to be in community with each other and with creation. And so in the midst of all this, one young boy answers the call to change it all. So this is my favorite interaction in the movie, just because it reminds me of the change we are all capable of. The little changes we need to make at home do make a difference. And the Lord has tasked each one of us with protecting the trees. So the Onceler said, "Each day since the Lorax left, I sat here regretting everything I've done, staring at the word unless and wondering what it meant. But now I'm thinking, well, maybe you're the reason the Lorax left that word here." I've asked this question to myself many times But Ted replied, me? Why would he leave that for me? And the Onceler replied, because unless someone like you cares a whole awful lot, nothing's going to get better. It's not. And so Ted replies saying, but nobody cares about the trees anymore. And I feel that line in and of itself really hits, because you can see by all the pollution and the way that we care for creation, the way that people treat the animals and just toss things aside nowadays. It seems as if that could almost be true of society today, but nobody cares about the trees anymore. So the Onceler says, then make them care. Plant a seed in the middle of town where everyone can see. Change the way things are. I know it may seem small and insignificant, but it's not about what it is. It's about what it can become. That's not just a seed any more than you're just a boy. And I think this statement is really indicative of our call to act and to engage in integral ecology. It is different. And we can do that in a few different ways. So here are just a few different links, some different organizations that you can reach out to that have an abundance of resources to learn about what exactly integral ecology is and the church's stance on the environment, as well as ways to become involved locally and to help even those who are affected by climate change and the changing environment around us. Links 1 and 2 are Catholic organizations which are extremely active in advocating for fruitful environmental change. Although their headquarters are in Washington, D.C., they have detailed resources that can help you learn more and become more aware of our individual impact on the environment at home and around us. The last 4 resources are ways that you can be the change we need to see in the world. Keeping Tampa Bay Beautiful is a volunteer-based organization. The Tampa Bay Environmental Restoration Fund is a competitive grants program that funds projects that are designed to restore and protect the waters of Tampa Bay. The Florida Aquarium has plenty of resources on their marine research, which is on track to positively impact not only Tampa Bay, but the world. They're doing some serious research there, and it brings me so much joy and it makes me so proud to be a part of the Tampa Bay area, just knowing that we are going to start a movement in regard to the environment because one of our own local institutions. And then finally, Thorn Ministries, which is a volunteer-based ministry that feeds the homeless in Tampa Bay on Sundays throughout the year. So this is one of my favorite quotes. A friend of mine got me a t-shirt and this was written on the back of it and I've loved it ever since. But it says, how cool is it that the same God that created mountains and oceans and galaxies looked at you and thought the world needed one of you too? We are all the Lord's creation, and the way we treat others and the environment should reflect it. We find ourselves in an interesting situation, being tasked with such a great responsibility. And while it is important to note that practicing integral ecology requires making sacrifices, it does not require completely changing our lifestyle all at once. Just as we are all unique, so are our circumstances. And it may mean that some cannot engage in integral ecology to the same extent as others. And that's okay. But we must be vigilant and be aware of what we are contributing to, the problem or the solution. So I would like to end by going over a few takeaways. One, that integral ecology is the idea that the climate crisis of today is the sum of societal and environmental issues. It's not one or the other. You can't look at the environment and not care about the trees and humans, how depleting our natural resources is going to affect us and the way that we function, the way that we live our daily lives. just as if we're not here to care for creation, like we're put here on earth to do, in the long run, there's a disconnect. And the goal is to be in solidarity with creation. And so another takeaway that I hope you get is that integral ecology is important because it connects us with our Christian identity, right? It embodies all 7 of the pillars of Catholic social teaching. It inspires hope for a brighter future. It's not this idea that the world is going to end tomorrow, but rather that what we do now has such an impact that we can at one point have a world where we are in union, in unity with God by our relationship with others and with nature. And we can practice this by gradually implementing changes at home and in the community that reflect Christ. We can speak out to defend creation out of a place of love. And then we can support our local homeless shelters or cleanup programs. These aren't extreme, unreasonable goals for us to have. These are things that we can do today. So as soon as I am done with this presentation, I'm turning off this light. It's simple things like that. And so I challenge you all to think about the ways that you can engage in integral ecology. Think of a few ways that you can change your lifestyle in a little ways, because they do add up. And in the grand scheme of things, the little things are very important. And so this is the end of my presentation. I'm very grateful for all of you for sitting through this, and I hope that you enjoyed this presentation and that it spoke to you in some way. And so with that, I'm going to pass it back to Sabrina for questions.
Okay, thank you, Jeanine. That was wonderful. We do have a couple of questions that have come in through the chat. If you have a question, I'm going to encourage you to put that in the chat. And I think that it's set up so that you can chat questions only to me. So first question is about legislation. I really appreciate that you touched on some of the really practical things that we can do. But I think it's a both and, really. So we're supposed to be making practical changes in our own lives to live more, to live more lightly on the earth, if you will. But also we need to act together legislatively. You mentioned the Clean Waterways Act, and the question that came in was about legislation. Is there some piece of legislation that we should be encouraging our members of Congress to act on now? Of course, the Florida House and Senate are not in session, but nationally, is there anything? Would it be this Clean Waterways Act, Jeanine, or something else that we can do now?
So the Clean Waterways Act is state legislation, so that is only for the state of Florida, whereas the Great American Outdoors Act is national legislation, it's federal. But I like to emphasize the fact that the government reflects the will of the people. That is their job. And so when the community starts and is in solidarity with each other, striving towards a specific goal, they will recognize that. And that's why it's important to reach out to them. So that way they're able to produce legislation which reflects our goals. And so although there are countless pieces of legislation that are trying to get through the ringer up in Washington, D.C., it is really important that we look at what our local representatives are doing. So Tampa City Council, even most specifically, like legislative wise, the state government. But that's where I think that the effort should be targeted if we want to see an immediate impact in our own communities.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. Yeah, Marianne Holtz had suggested the Catholic Climate Covenant, and you mentioned that in your presentation as well. I know I could see that some folks were jotting that down. So I wanted to let you know, we're going to send you a copy of the PowerPoint in addition to a recording of tonight's talk, so that you'll have all of those links will be hot links, and you can go in and click on them and explore some of the resources that Jeanine has given you. And we're hoping that in a future webcast that we'll be able to really highlight some of the work of the Catholic Climate Covenant and their parish teams as well that you could set up to be more of an advocate in your parish and to gather groups of like-minded people to do the same. We have a question that came in from Sarah. Oops, and it just moved on me. I'm sorry, one second. Sarah had asked, Jeanine, if you have any favorite at-home tips or methods for being eco-conscious. She said she's trying to use reusable sandwich bags, food storage, and beeswax, things like that. Any favorites or suggestions, Jeanine?
Mine is definitely to work on water usage. I am big on focusing on not using as many plastic water bottles. I'm really bad about that, but it's something that I'm aware of and I know and recognize. So I've been like making a big push towards using, reusable mugs. But also we have a dish bin in our sink now where we don't necessarily leave the water running the entire time we're doing our dishes, but we're conserving it. And so that's a hard question because I feel like it's really tailored to the individual, whereas like my problem is with water bottles. But I think those two are my favorite.
Good. Patricia said when she was your age, she learned that the U.S. is about 4% of the world's population, but we use 25% of the world's resources. And recently she learned that we create about 30% of the world's garbage. She said, as a Christian, I cannot justify this. How do you feel about this?
I definitely think that this is reflective of the throwaway culture. And Pope Francis really emphasizes this in Laudato Si. And it is sad to know. And honestly, as a recent college grad trying to get by, I want to, invest in, they're making bamboo paper towels now where it's faster to grow and it's much more absorbent. But having the kind of budget that I do is really difficult to invest in those things. So I would love to see the world, or specifically the United States, start moving towards encouraging at a local level more of these projects. Because like I said before, if we're doing things on a broader scale, yes, it's great that the country has an awareness of it, but really when you want to strike to the heart of people, you have to strike where they're most comfortable. And so our parishes, and I think really emphasizing in our parishes the importance of nature and creation is a great way to start inspiring people, because once we are inspired at home, we're supposed to be stewards of Christ. We're supposed to be his witnesses. So we take what we learn and we go out and we share it with the world. And although, it's hard to change the hearts and minds of the world and society today, when you are so rooted in your faith and so passionate and feel so strongly about it, kind of like Ted, you got to do it. You got to get out there. And so that I think is an important aspect of, yes, including nature in pro-life, because it is in its own way, it's its own life, different than ours, but it is nonetheless a thing that the Lord created, just like our dogs and our cats and fish. So we really do, I think, need to pay more attention to that.
Well, I absolutely consider the environment a pro-life issue personally. So I emphasize that a lot when I'm giving talks, and I always appreciate that. Someone has just suggested the kiosks in the area that have the water where you can just bring your own jug and refill it is a good suggestion. I've done that a lot myself. Someone else has asked about FLCAN. I think that's the Florida Catholic Conference Advocacy Network. And if you sign up for advocacy alerts from one area, I would suggest the Florida Catholic Conference will kind of highlight that in the resources that we send to you. They do advocacy on a variety of life and justice issues, but they do highlight environmental issues as well when the state conference is in session and beyond. So we'll encourage you to sign up for that. Let's see, we've got time for another question here. Oh, Marianne sent some more, a list of 10 things that we can do, and I'm going to forward that to you as well. I'll put that in the link in just a second. And okay, and Anna has asked, what do you think about the call to reduce the consumption of red meat to help reduce the emissions of greenhouse gases, for example? It's a good question.
I don't know if many of you are aware, but Burger King is literally changing the diet of their cows to monitor the way that the cows themselves are contributing to, natural gases. But that is a difficult one because you have to peel back a lot of different layers to answer that question. I personally don't like red meat, so I'm not such a big contributor to that myself, but I do know a lot of people who are, and there, like I said, there are a lot of layers to it, and I think that cutting back on it, maybe not eating it as frequently, is something that you can do. But for some people, it's a staple to their diet, and so if it's unhealthy for you to not eat it or such, then I would advise, just doing what you can and just being conscious of it and not being wasteful with it.
Yeah, that's a tough question that I think I know a lot of people that are, not only for their health benefits, but just for the environment, are reducing their consumption of meat in general, and particularly red meat. And a lot of people are doing meatless Mondays. As Catholics, I think a lot of us can just go back to the practice of meatless Fridays. So yeah, it's a tough thing in my house with my kids eating. They're picky nature, but it's something that we're called to be more mindful of and more conscious of. So that's a really good question. I think we're at the end of our time tonight. Someone says they went to a plant-based diet 2 years ago. Good job. So we're working towards that in my house. Jeanine, I just want to thank you so much. I want to thank all of you for taking the time to be with us. It's great to have you in our area here, Jeanine, but I guess we'll be able to Zoom you in when you do go back to school for future workshops. Like I said, we are looking to do something more with the Catholic Climate Covenant and their resources, so stay tuned. This entire year is the 50th anniversary year of Earth Day and the 5th anniversary year of Laudato Si. We saw when the pandemic hit and people were staying home, we saw nature coming back to life. And I think that's opened our eyes to what reducing our carbon footprint can do. It's given us a little taste of that, and hopefully enough to help to move the needle. These are tough decisions to make, tough things to do personally, but our future absolutely requires it. It requires that we make decisions personally and that we act together legislatively. So now I have your email addresses as well from registering tonight. We'll be following up with you when we have legislation that does relate to the environment. And so again, I thank you for your time tonight. I want to thank Jeanine, and stay tuned for more. Good night, and God bless you all.